Hey there movie lovers, welcome back to Rocky Watches Movies. Today we're diving into the world of espionage, gadgets and larger than life villains with the 1977 James Bond classic The Spy Who Loved Me. From its jaw-dropping ski jump opening to the introduction of the iconic Lotus Esprit submarine, this film delivered spectacle on a grand scale. But behind all the action and glamour lies a treasure trove of fascinating stories. So grab your gadgets, settle in and let's dive into 20 things you never knew about The Spy Who Loved Me. This remains the only Eon Productions Bond film to be produced in the same sequence as its source novel was originally written. The Spy Who Loved Me marked both the 10th official entry in the James Bond film series and the 10th Bond novel penned by Ian Fleming. The 1962 novel is uniquely told from the perspective of the Bond girl, as 007 pursues Spectre following the events of Thunderball. It proved to be one of Fleming's least successful works. He was so dissatisfied with it that he withdrew its publication in the UK during his lifetime. When selling the film rights to Harry Saltzman and Albert Broccoli, he insisted that only the title could be used, with none of the novel's content carried over. Producer Harry Saltzman was facing a series of personal and financial difficulties, including mounting debts, his wife's terminal illness, and his own struggles with depression. In 1975, he sold his share of the Bond franchise to United Artists for £20 million, leaving his producing partner Albert R. Broccoli to continue alone. Nevertheless, United Artists demonstrated its confidence in Broccoli by committing $13.5 million to the new film's budget. Saltzman did, however, have some involvement with The Spy Who Loved Me during its early pre-production stages. Numerous writers contributed to the script during development, including directors John Landis and original director Guy Hamilton, along with screenwriters Sterling Siliphant, Carrie Bates, Tom Mankiewicz and Anthony Barwick. Authors Anthony Burgess, Ronald Hardy and Derek Marlowe were also involved. In total, 12 writers worked across 15 drafts, with Richard Maybaum and Christopher Wood getting the official credit. Production delays were partly caused by legal disputes over the script. Thunderball co-writer and producer Kevin McClory filed a lawsuit, claiming his script Warhead had been plagiarized due to similarities involving nuclear submarines. The injunction was rejected, allowing Eon Productions to proceed. However, the villain's name was changed from Stavros to Stromberg to avoid legal issues linked to Blofeld, whose rights belonged to McClory. Thunderbird's creator Jerry Anderson also threatened legal action, having previously written a Bond script featuring a villain named Zodiac, who used a supertanker to launch ballistic missiles. Noticing similarities, he raised concerns, but the matter was quickly settled, with Eon Productions purchasing the rights to his original idea. The Lotus Esprit in the film proved very popular. A hollow Lotus Esprit S1 was launched from a pier while Naomi's helicopter gave chase, with miniature footage showing the car sinking before transforming into a submersible. Derek Meddings created several full-scale models to depict each stage of the transformation. Underwater scenes were filmed in the Bahamas using both miniatures and a full-scale submersible developed by Ken Adam with Perry Oceanographic. Nicknamed Wet Nelly after You Only Live Twice, the Lotus submarine wasn't watertight and was operated by divers, with Alka-Seltzer tablets used to create air bubbles. Following the film's release, demand for White Lotus Esprit models surged, leading to a 3-year waiting list. In the Lotus Esprit chase, a motorcyclist pursues Bond and Anya on a Kawasaki Z900 with a sidecar that appears to be a missile, but was actually a working vehicle. Modified at Pinewood Studios, it featured scooter wheels and a Suzuki 185 engine, with a stunt driver lying flat inside, steering through a smoked windscreen. While the film suggests the rider launches the sidecar, it was actually detached by the driver. The vehicle only reached around 20 miles an hour, with the footage sped up in editing to create the illusion of a high-speed missile. The eyesight of cinematographer Claude Renoir was failing at the time, leaving him unable to see to the far end of the vast supertanker set, and, as a result, unable to properly oversee the lighting. Production designer Ken Adam turned to his friend Stanley Kubrick, who, on the strict condition of complete secrecy, stepped in to supervise the lighting. Kubrick's stepdaughter Katerina Kubrick also worked on the film as a dental prosthetics designer, creating the metal dentures worn by Richard Kiel for his role as Jaws. The original script called for Jaws to meet his end after Bond used an industrial magnet aboard the supertanker to drag him into the ship's furnace. The sequence was even storyboarded using Richard Kiel and Roger Moore as models, and was reportedly rehearsed, but it was ultimately abandoned in favour of bringing the character back for the next film. When the film was previewed, audiences cheered upon seeing Jaws swimming away at the end, confirming the decision to keep him alive was a good one. Jaws actor Richard Kiel could only keep the metal teeth in his mouth for around half a minute at a time due to the intense pain and discomfort. Despite this, he was often required to deliver comedic expressions, which stood in stark contrast to how he actually felt while wearing the extremely uncomfortable dental pieces. Kiel later revealed that the chain his character bites through during the pyramid sequence was made of licorice, much like the cables used in Moonraker. Christopher Wood's novelisation of the film, based on his own screenplay, includes additional background details about Jaws that do not appear in the finished movie. According to the book, the character's real name is Zbigniew Krzywiecki. I wonder if I got that correct. He is described as having been born in Poland, the son of a travelling circus strongman and the chief wardess of the women's prison in Krakow. The Sonnet Lumière is a striking spectacle that shows off the man-made grandeur of the Great Sphinx of Giza and the surrounding pyramids. Unfortunately, it proved impossible to properly capture the outdoor lighting effects on location. As a result, Ken Adam and special visual effects supervisor Derek Meddings recreated the sequence at Pinewood Studios, constructing a sandy dune and building miniatures of the Sphinx and pyramids to stage their own version of the spectacle. In one scene where Bond shadows Jaws as he pursues Fakesh, a production still of Roger Moore was pasted over the footage that had been shot on location at Giza, creating the illusion that Bond was watching Jaws from behind a boulder. During Bond's final showdown with Karl Stromberg, he was originally meant to stand behind the chair offered to him. However, Roger Moore chose to sit in it during filming to heighten the tension. The chair had been rigged to explode as Stromberg fired explosive bullets. Moore narrowly leapt clear before it detonated, escaping with only minor injuries, though he reportedly carried the effects of them for the rest of his life. A representative of the Egyptian government accompanied the filmmakers during location shooting. When Bond traps Jaws beneath collapsing scaffolding at the Temple of Karnak, Roger Moore mimed his improvised line of
Egyptian builders,
so no one would hear it, with plans to record it later at Pinewood Studios. This was done to avoid offending the on-set representative, who was there to ensure Egypt wasn't portrayed negatively. Ironically, the line drew big laughs from Egyptian audiences after the film's release. The film's opening parachute ski jump nearly ended in disaster for stuntman Rick Sylvester. During the descent, one ski came loose and fell alongside him, briefly clipping his unopened parachute just before deployment. A split-second moment that could have been catastrophic. The incident remains visible in the final cut, adding to the sequence's realism. Sylvester was paid $30,000 for the stunt, reflecting its complexity and genuine danger. The closing credits originally promised that James Bond would return in For Your Eyes Only, suggesting a more grounded follow-up adventure. However, the enormous success of science fiction blockbusters such as Star Wars and Close Encounters of the Third Kind prompted a change of direction behind the scenes. Eager to capitalise on the booming popularity of space-themed spectacles, the producers opted instead to fast-track Moonraker, sending Bond into orbit in one of the series' most ambitious and commercially minded entries. Viktor Toyansky appears uncredited as the man with the bottle who questions whether he is drunk after witnessing the Lotus Esprit drive out of the water. He reprised essentially the same role in the next two Bond films. In Moonraker, he is seen drinking in Venice when Bond drives the gondola out of the canal, and in For Your Eyes Only, he appears as a patron in the lodge from which Bond skis off a table. Toyansky was in fact better known for his work behind the camera as an assistant director. Early in production, the fight between Bond and Sandor was planned for the mummy exhibit at Cairo's Museum of Egyptian Antiquities. However, recreating it at Pinewood Studios proved too costly, so the scene was relocated to the Geyer Anderson Museum, where the fight takes place inside and on the rooftop garden. Although the idea was scrapped, the sequence resurfaced in the next Bond movie, Moonraker, as the fight between Chang and Bond in the Vanini glass showroom. Major Anya Amasova's KGB lover was played by Michael Billington, who had a long association with the Bond series dating back to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. He auditioned for the role of Bond in that film and met director Peter Hunt but lost out to George Lazenby. He later tested again for Live and Let Die, though Roger Moore was ultimately cast. Billington went on to play the brief but key role of Barsov in The Spy Who Loved Me and continued pursuing Bond, screen testing again for Moonraker and Octopussy when Moore's return was uncertain. He did, however, portray Bond behind the scenes, while screen testing actresses for this film. There had never been a United States Navy submarine named the USS Wayne. However, art director Peter Lamont later recalled that shortly after the film's release, the production received a letter from a naval enthusiast, pointing out that assigning the Wayne the pennant number 593 was in extremely poor taste. This was because the number had in fact belonged to the USS Thresher, SSN 593, which tragically sank in deep water off the coast of Massachusetts in 1963 during sea trials. Although Lamont had taken great care to ensure the number was not linked to a vessel in service, he was deeply dismayed by the discovery. During filming in Egypt, the catering failed to arrive, prompting producer Albert Broccoli to take matters into his own hands. Gathering a small crew, he drove a jeep into town to source fresh ingredients. Well known as an enthusiastic amateur chef at home, Broccoli prepared a hearty meal for the entire cast and crew, with both he and Roger Moore serving the food. And there you have it, folks. You now know a little bit more about The Spy Who Loved Me. If you enjoyed the video, which I presume you did as you got this far, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos coming to Rocky Watches Movies. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.